Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Rhode Island again because this ship got a buff since I last played it. The version I played had a 24-second reload. This one that is now released in loot boxes, you gotta gamble for it unfortunately. It now has a 22-second reload, and that's a pretty big deal, especially when we combine that with how you have to play this ship, which is an HE spammer. This is a very HE focused ship. Even though the armor piercing does have improved pen angles, it just doesn't hit hard enough, where the HE kind of slaps people. That is a 10,000 damage salvo, or near enough, and a fire into that Yamato at a pretty far range. This thing plays a lot like a battle cruiser, I think. It's even more like a heavy cruiser even than a battle cruiser perhaps, just because of how much HE you're going to be firing with this thing, and that you get a radar. It's very, very interesting to play with that radar. I don't think you're going to want to use it early on in matches. I think you're going to typically end up playing this ship more like this, where we go to the flank we spawned at, we start by doing the cringe, kite out, run away, spam HE type of thing, and sit here and farm the battleships for free. It's not the most engaging gameplay, but I did get a very, very nice game. And in fact, this is the only game I've played in this ship since that buff. Very first game of the new patch with the Rhode Island, and we got this one where we're gonna do a ton of damage and really see the strengths of this ship. I've of course covered this ship a decent amount already this week. I'm sorry if you've had enough Rhode Island content, but I do want to start covering these new ships a little bit more than I have in the past. I've kind of, like I said, going into 2024 here, I kind of in the past have not really covered some of the new ships all that in depth. I've certainly done the first impressions videos and then sort of moved on, where I want to do a little better, get a little more information out there for you guys, figure out how to play these ships, and then have a few good matches in them. And Rhode Island I do figure like I've figured out. Our last video talked a lot about different strategies you can employ, where the strengths of this ship are. You can think of this game as a bit of a continuation of that, where just putting into practice the things I've learned over playing the ship in its testing phase. And of course, getting a 2-second buff to our reload helps too. That's certainly very, very nice. This poor Yamato eating another fire here, 5,000 damage on that one. Not an insane salvo by any means, but that's still only 3 full pens into this poor Yamato, and we're already up to 60k damage. And we're just sitting here at the back, spamming HE out of our battleship. I think the radar is going to be more useful in the mid to late game. I think if you're getting into the closer range fights, wow, that's 13,000 damage there, by the way. Crazy. Very, very crazy ship, I gotta say. I didn't like it at the beginning, but I think that's because I was just shooting way too much AP. If you shoot HE, this thing is pretty nuts, I gotta say. But back to that radar, I do think mid to late game, you're going to notice that the power of that radar is very, very strong. I think the speed of this ship combined with that radar is going to make this ship just excellent at clutching out games in the mid to late game, as well as just covering a lot of ground, because you do go very, very fast. I've managed to fit Brisk into this build yet, which we'll take a look at after the game. I do think this is a pretty optimal build, at least for the way I've been playing this ship. I think it's really, really good to have Brisk as well as Furious. The only thing I've really given up is heavy AP, because of course we're not firing much AP, so what's the point in trying to buff our armor piercing damage? As well as taking the debuff to the fires, having them last longer on our ship. That said though, there are opportunities where you want to be firing armor piercing. I think it really comes down to broadside cruisers, as well as very lightly armored other ships that have citadels, so carriers I think come to mind as well if they're broadside, even at range. But some of the battleships can take some decent hits to armor piercing. Just keep in mind, we were doing 10k salvos in a fire to that Yamato at over 20 kilometers with our HE. It's pretty hard to beat that with armor piercing, right? We do manage to grab a citadel there into the Annapolis, getting a bit of a faster flank there into his side. Managing to catch him off guard there. He was playing very, very aggressive though, so respect to that. Didn't quite work out for him, but really like to see people pushing in, of course. But then we swap back to the high explosive as soon as we're done dealing with a broadside cruiser, for example. And that's the other thing about getting this ship now on my main account without any of the testing limitations, I guess we'll say, which is having special commanders access, right? Where we get access to having expert loader or gun feeder, whatever it's called now. On the American commanders, if you have the special ones, they actually reduce the swap time between HE and AP. Only when you're fully loaded, of course, but that's really, really nice to have when you're dealing with a ship that wants to be spamming HE, but looking for opportunities to use the armor piercing as well on opportune targets that just happen to go broadside to you. It also helps, of course, when you're in the progress of loading. You can swap over to the AP without a penalty as well these days, which is quite nice and very powerful on this ship. So I think the 2-second reload combined with just spamming HE more, fully committing myself to spamming HE out of this thing, and that extra little buff to gun feeder there is making me think this ship is just very, very strong. I played it wrong initially. Disappointed, of course, with having to shoot HE, and I was trying to force the armor piercing way of playing this ship, and that's just really not the way this thing is going to go. So unfortunately, I do think they may have put a pretty strong tier 10 premium inside these loot boxes, unfortunately. But if you can be patient, hopefully in a year from now or so, this ship will be available for a more reasonable resource, or at least for a known price that isn't as insane as, what, 96 or 92,000 doubloons? Although there's a 15% discount, I think. Is it 15% now? With buying a bunch of the boxes all at once. So still very, very expensive, though, to get the Rhode Island. But I think for those of you that managed to pull this thing in the first box, you got yourself a pretty nice tier 10 premium, if you're okay with the playstyle of spamming some more high explosive. Now, we're playing quite risky here, pushing in as we are like this. The reason I used my radar there just out of nowhere was I was hoping the Below was surfacing, and that's how I went from being detected by planes or just not detected at all to being normal spotted. I was hoping I would catch the Below, but it was the Shimakaze that got more into our range. Fortunately, the 40-second uptime, which is a long time, allows us to just get in range to get one more salvo out on him. But there is a Below around, and we managed to slow down and turn in. So the extra speed we're getting here doesn't just translate to moving around the map quicker. It actually allows us to be much, much more maneuverable and slow down quicker, turn in quicker, all that stuff. It's very, very useful. So we don't actually take the shotgun here from the Below, fortunately for us, but we are in a bit of trouble here. Duncan here is actually going to go broadside to us. And this is where you got to really notice how bad the AP is on this ship. Duncan is a very, very easy battleship to Citadel. Very, very high out of the water Citadel, and not the most armored. It's a battle cruiser type of battleship, right? And yeah, 3 shatters, 1 torp protection hit there. And keep in mind, we have improved AP pen angles as well, so unfortunate, I guess we'll say. I was pretty disappointed there. So it is really lightly armored targets you're looking for. So mainly cruisers that you're going after with the armor piercing if they're showing broadside. But if it's a heavier cruiser and they're not showing broadside, honestly, just still stick with the HE. I'm a little disappointed saying that. Again, to reiterate, I've already said this a bunch of times in the other videos, but seeing a battleship like this one with improved AP pen angles on, you know, decent sized gun, 356 is pretty decent size. Not at this tier, but improved pen angles should help it out quite a bit. And it just really doesn't, unfortunately. The sub does get spotted. I was helped out a ton this game by this Daring here, who helped deal with the DD up in the north and then came back here to help me with the sub. So MVP to this guy. Unfortunately for us, the sub does get one more torp send at us, as well as a ping. But when you're running away from submarines, that's the only time it's easy to dodge the torpedoes coming at you. So they stop homing at a certain distance to your ship. For battleships, it actually makes it really easy when you're kiting away, because they stop homing so far away from you. So once they've reached that distance where they stop homing, you just slow down and turn out. That's really what it comes down to, and you're pretty much guaranteed to dodge the torpedoes if you're running away at like a 30 to 60 degree angle or something like that. It's not too bad. It's why I say when you see a sub, you should probably turn and run away, because that's the only time there actually is something you can do to dodge the incoming torps. Otherwise, you just gotta hope. Or be extremely fast and be able to stop on a dime like we did earlier and barely have those blowout torps miss us. Duncan here is probably going to go down, so that's going to be our 4th kill in this one. We're already up to 175,000 damage. You can see just how pumped up our team was earlier on in this match, where we all kind of went to the C cap. Sometimes that doesn't work out so well, but a lot of the time when you're playing a battleship, that can be very difficult for you to impact the game and really help your team break out of that cocoon of sorts. And the Rhode Island being so fast really allowed us to do that, where some of the other battleships being a lot slower, things like a Vermont, for example, sure, you got the firepower, but you're so slow that it's sometimes hard to deal with games like that, where having that speed is very, very nice. Jumping forward to the end of this game here, we do manage to find the carrier in the corner, and I have AP loaded for this one. Pretty far range, but we aim quite high here. Little worried about aim bugs when people are so near islands like this, or even stuck on islands, but that's pretty nice dispersion. I think you can probably see where this is going. So the IAP is worth swapping to, but really only for ships that have lightly armored citadels. I think any sort of battleship citadel, it's really, really difficult to get citadels on them. Just the AP is not great at punching through a lot of armor, but if it's lightly armored citadels, it can do some good work for us. So that's a Kraken and 220,000 damage in the first game I played in the Rhode Island, at least after it was released, after it got buffed from when I was originally playing it. That 24 to 22 seconds now. And there it is. As you can see, 1 total game played with the Rhode Island, at least since release. Test ships don't count towards our stats, which is a little unfortunate in this case, because it would have been nice to see what my average has been while testing this ship, but sometimes those test ships do get changed between testing them and then they fully get released. So for this one, that actually would have been a bit of a negative, where I would have played so many games with that worse reload. But here now, we do manage to have that 22 seconds, which is quite nice. And that includes us just taking accuracy here, which is very, very, very powerful. This ship can land a lot of HE shells on target, and unlike some other battle cruisers with smaller guns at this tier, we still have decent fire chance. 31% is no joke. Something like the Mecklenburg, for example, similar idea, battle cruiser level guns and dispersion, has a longer reload, as well as a 27% fire chance. So you can see how the Rhode Island, sorry, I was going to say Florida because that's what the guns are, but you can see how the Rhode Island can do so well with that high explosive. The other reason being that the alpha damage is just much higher on this high explosive as well. 5,000 is pretty good for HE. But I haven't really changed anything when it comes to the upgrades here on the ship. It really comes down to the commander. If you have these special commanders, having gun feeder be 60% instead of, what is it usually, 40%, I think? It's a pretty big deal, especially on a ship like this one that does want to find those opportune cruisers to go after with the armor piercing if they go broadside, but for the most part sticks to high explosive. Still keeping grease the gears here because the turrets can turn a little slowly, so improved grease the gears here is nice. But really what's changed is I'm not shooting AP, so I'm not taking super heavy AP shells. That frees up 3 points for us, which allows us to take Brisk as well as Consumable Specialist. So getting our consumables back sooner, as well as just being much, much quicker. We can get up over 40 knots then when we're undetected with our speed boost up, which is very, very fast. It allows you to react to things going on in the game and, like I said, break out of a bit of a turtling team like that. Pick the right side to go to and then just send it in. And sometimes that can work out. Furious, though, still very nice for getting our reload down. We're not a tanking battleship. We're not tanky at all. So when we eat a fire, that really just kind of buffs our DPM. We're not playing in a position where we're overly getting shot at because our armor's not that great, like we've already talked about. So Furious is just kind of a 10% reload buff some of the time for us, I think is the best way to think about this. And not worth going in secondaries, of course, because we're playing too far back to actually make use of them. So that's going to do it for the Rhode Island today and this week. Probably for a little while. I have kind of inundated you guys with this ship, but it's a new one, and I did want to cover it because my opinions have changed on it. And I had some good games as well, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.